Nia was born into a world of hardship, but her heart remained untouched by bitterness. From the moment she could walk, she learned the struggles of poverty. Her small village, surrounded by lush green hills and golden fields, was a place where wealth determined one's worth. Unfortunately, Nia had little to her name apart from the love of her aging mother, who worked tirelessly to provide for them. As a child, Nia would watch the wealthier children of the village play with their fine clothes and polished shoes, their laughter ringing through the air. She longed to join them, but they never allowed her to come near. "You are just a beggar's daughter," they would sneer, turning their backs on her. The sting of their words never left her heart, yet she never let it dull her spirit. She believed that kindness was worth more than gold. Her mother, Abony, was her guiding light. "Nia," she would say while weaving baskets to sell in the market, "true wealth is not in riches but in the goodness of your soul. Never let the cruelty of others make you forget who you are." Nia took those words to heart. She helped the elderly carry water from the well, shared what little food she had with those who had even less, and always greeted everyone with a smile. Despite her own struggles, she found joy in making others happy. However, the villagers did not see her kindness. All they saw was a poor girl in tattered clothes, a girl they believed had nothing to offer. The young men of the village, especially those from wealthy families, would never consider her a suitable wife. "Who would want to marry a girl who can't even afford proper shoes?" the women would whisper amongst themselves. Their words, though cruel, did not break her. As Nia grew older, she could not ignore the reality of her situation. Her mother's health was declining, and the burden of survival weighed heavily on her shoulders. She took on whatever work she could find, washing clothes, tending to animals, gathering firewood, all in an effort to keep their tiny home from falling apart. But no matter how hard she worked, it was never enough. Her struggles did not go unnoticed. There was one person in the village who saw Nia for more than just her poverty: Kofi, a humble farmer's son. He admired her strength and kindness, but he feared what his family and the villagers would say if he pursued her. In their eyes, love alone was not enough. One day during the village festival, when young men and women came together in hopes of finding a match, Nia stood on the sidelines. The wealthier girls, dressed in their finest garments, laughed and twirled, hoping to catch the eye of a suitor. Nia, in her simple dress, was invisible to them. Yet she held her head high. Deep down, she knew she was more than her circumstances. She dreamed of a future where she would be loved not for her status, but for the person she truly was. But in a village where riches ruled over character, that dream seemed impossible. Little did Nia know, her fate was already in motion. The very people who mocked her would one day bow at her feet, and the world that once rejected her would come to recognize the power of a pure heart. Nia had always known that love could be cruel, but she had never imagined that her own heart would be the victim of such a brutal betrayal. The quiet village where she had been born and raised was small, where everyone knew everyone and secrets were difficult to keep. Her love for Kofi had never been a secret. From the moment their paths had first crossed as children, there had been a spark between them, a connection that deepened with time. As they grew older, that childhood friendship blossomed into something more, something neither of them could deny. Kofi was not just any young man in the village. He was the son of one of the wealthiest families, a family known for their vast farmlands, trading connections, and grand feasts that only a few were privileged to attend. Nia, on the other hand, was the daughter of a poor widow, barely scraping by with her mother, weaving baskets and selling herbs to survive. Their love was a tale of contrasts, wealth and poverty, privilege and struggle, yet none of it had mattered to them. They had whispered dreams of a future together beneath the old baobab tree, where they had carved their initials as a silent promise to each other. But the world was not as kind as their youthful dreams. One evening, Kofi's parents summoned him into their grand hut, the flickering oil lamps casting ominous shadows on the walls. His mother, a proud woman with gold rings on every finger, did not bother to hide her disdain. His father, a man whose voice carried the weight of authority, did not mince words. "You cannot marry that girl," his father stated firmly, his voice leaving no room for argument. "She has nothing to offer you. A wife should bring wealth, status, and strong alliances. Nia brings none of those things." Kofi's heart clenched at their words, but he remained silent, unwilling to argue. He loved Nia, but he also loved his family. He had always been taught to respect their wishes, to obey without question. His mother leaned in, her voice softer but no less piercing. "If you choose her, you choose a life of suffering, Kofi. Do you want your children to live in hunger? To be mocked and ridiculed? We have already arranged for you to meet Amina, the merchant's daughter. She is of noble birth, and her family will offer a dowry beyond compare. The words sank deep into his heart, filling him with doubt. That night he did not visit the baobab tree where Nia waited for him. He did not send a message or offer an explanation. Days passed and the whispers in the village grew. Then the final blow came. At the annual village gathering where celebrations were held under the moonlit sky, Kofi stood before everyone, his voice steady but his heart aching. "I cannot marry Nia," he declared, his eyes avoiding hers. "I need a wife who can stand beside me in prosperity, who can offer my family a secure future. I wish her well, but she is not the one for me." A stunned silence fell over the crowd. Gasps of disbelief filled the air. Nia felt the world tilt beneath her feet as his words sliced through her like a blade. The man who had once promised her the world, who had whispered forever into her ears, had just cast her aside like a forgotten dream. Murmurs of pity and scorn spread through the villagers. Some looked at Nia with sympathy, while others smirked as if they had always known she was not good enough. Her step faltered as she turned away, her vision blurred by tears, yet she refused to let them see her break. With her heart shattered, she walked away from the gathering, her dignity intact, but her soul aching in a way she had never known before. Little did they know, fate was not yet done with Nia. Her story was far from over, and those who mocked her today would soon bow before her in awe. Devastated and humiliated, Nia could no longer bear the whispers and judgmental stares of the villagers. Her heart ached as she ran from the marketplace, her feet carrying her far beyond the village's edge. Tears blurred her vision as she pushed past towering trees, deeper into the dense forest. She didn't know where she was going, she only knew she needed to escape the pain. After what felt like hours, exhaustion forced her to stop. She collapsed by the roots of an ancient baobab tree, her sobs echoing through the still forest. The betrayal cut deep. Kofi had promised to stand by her side, yet he had cast her away the moment his family disapproved. "Why is kindness never enough?" she whispered to herself, staring up at the shifting branches above. Suddenly a rustling sound startled her. Nia wiped her tears and turned to see a hunched figure stepping out from the shadows. An old woman wrapped in layers of colorful fabric studied her with piercing eyes. Her silver hair was braided into intricate patterns, and her wrinkled hands clutched a wooden staff carved with ancient symbols. "You weep as though your soul has been torn apart," the woman said, her voice soft yet firm. Nia hesitated, unsure if she should trust the stranger. But something in the woman's gaze felt comforting, almost familiar. Without thinking, she poured out her story, the rejection, the humiliation, the aching loneliness that had followed her all her life. The old woman listened in silence, nodding occasionally as if she had heard such tales before. When Nia finished, the woman took a deep breath and spoke. "Do not mourn over those who cannot see your worth," she said. "Fate has woven something greater for you, but you must be willing to claim it." Nia frowned. "What do you mean?" The woman turned, gesturing for Nia to follow. "Come with me, child. You have much to learn." A part of Nia hesitated. She had heard stories of witches and spirits lurking in the forest, but something about this woman felt different. There was no malice in her eyes, only wisdom and a quiet strength. With nothing left to lose, Nia rose to her feet and followed the woman deeper into the forest, unaware that she was walking toward her destiny. Nia followed the old woman through the thick forest, stepping carefully over roots and tangled vines. The deeper they walked, the more the air seemed to change, heavy with something unspoken, something ancient. A strange energy pulsed around her, making her heart race with both fear and curiosity. After what felt like hours, the dense trees gave way to an opening. Nia gasped as she saw what lay before her. Hidden behind a curtain of vines was a magnificent palace, its golden towers peeking through the foliage. The walls shimmered under the fading sunlight, covered in intricate carvings of animals, warriors, and symbols Nia didn't recognize. Where are we?" she whispered, her voice barely above a breath. The old woman turned to her, a small smile playing on her lips. "Welcome to what was once the greatest kingdom of this land. And my dear child, welcome home." Nia's eyes widened. "Home?" she echoed in confusion. The woman nodded, stepping forward. "Come inside. There is much for you to learn." Still dazed, Nia followed, entering the grand halls of the palace. Despite its beauty, the place felt abandoned, silent, yet filled with whispers of the past. The walls bore paintings of rulers, their regal faces watching her as she walked. Finally, they reached a large chamber where torches flickered against golden pillars. The old woman turned to face her, her expression now serious. "Nia, there is something you must know," she began. You are not just a poor girl from a forgotten village. You are the last living heir of this kingdom, the rightful queen of a land that was stolen from your ancestors. Nia's heart pounded. What? That can't be true. The woman sighed, placing a gentle hand on Nia's shoulder. Long ago this kingdom flourished under your ancestors' rule. But jealousy and greed led to its downfall. A rival clan invaded, slaughtering the royal family and claiming the land as their own. But one infant, your grandmother, was smuggled out by a loyal guardian. She was raised in secrecy, far from her true home. That bloodline runs through your veins, Nia. You are the rightful ruler of this kingdom. Nia staggered back, shaking her head. This doesn't make sense. I've been poor all my life. I was rejected for being nothing. The woman smiled sadly. They rejected you because they didn't know who you truly were. But fate has a way of bringing justice. You were meant to find your way here, to claim what is yours. Nia's mind spun. Everything she thought she knew was unraveling before her. Could it be true? Had she been living her whole life unaware of her own power? As she looked around the grand palace, something deep within her stirred, an unfamiliar yet undeniable feeling. She didn't know what awaited her next, but one thing was clear. Her story was far from over. Nia stood in the grand chamber of the hidden palace, her heart pounding as the old woman's words echoed in her ears. To reclaim your rightful place you must prove yourself, the guardian declared. The ancestors have set 3 trials, one for strength, one for wisdom, and one for compassion. Only by passing them will you be worthy of the throne. Nia swallowed hard. She had spent her whole life being told she was nothing, rejected for her poverty and insignificance. But now she had a chance to prove that she was more than what others had believed. She took a deep breath. I am ready. The trial of strength. The first test led Nia to the warrior's circle, a sacred ground where past rulers had trained. She was given a heavy staff and placed against a masked warrior twice her size. You must fight, the old woman said. Not with anger but with purpose. The warrior lunged, swinging his staff with force. Nia barely dodged, feeling the wind rush past her cheek. She had never been trained in combat, yet something inside her refused to give up. She gripped the staff tightly, recalling the struggles she had endured, starving nights, cruel laughter, the pain of rejection. She had survived all of it. With renewed determination she struck back. Though she was smaller, she was quick, her movements guided by instinct. She dodged, countered, and finally landed a decisive blow that sent the warrior to his knees. The old woman nodded in approval. Strength is not only in the body but in the soul. You have passed the trial of wisdom. For the second trial, Nia was led to a room filled with glowing symbols on the walls. In the center stood an ancient puzzle, pieces scattered before her. You must solve this riddle to open the path forward, the guardian instructed. But beware, some choices will lead you astray. Nia studied the puzzle. It depicted a tree with missing branches, a sun without its rays, a river that did not flow. The answer was hidden in their incompleteness. She recalled the teachings of the elders in her village, the stories whispered around the fire. Everything in nature thrived in balance. A tree needed its branches to shelter, the sun its rays to warm, and a river its flow to nourish the land. With careful hands she placed the missing pieces, restoring the image. The symbols glowed brightly and the old woman smiled. Wisdom is not knowing all the answers, it is understanding the world around you. You have passed the trial of compassion. For the final test, Nia was taken to a chamber where 3 people stood, a starving child, an injured warrior, and an old woman trembling from the cold. You have only 1 blanket and 1 meal, the guardian said. Who do you help? Nia's heart ached. Each person needed aid, but she could only choose one. She looked at the child, so small, so helpless. She thought of the warrior, wounded yet strong. Then she saw the old woman, fragile with age. Finally, she knelt and tore the blanket into 3 pieces, giving each person warmth. Then she divided the meal, offering a portion to all. The old woman nodded in approval. A ruler's heart must be just. True compassion does not choose, it finds a way for all. As Nia stood, a golden light surrounded her, the spirits of the ancestors whispering in approval. She had passed. She was ready. Nia stood before the sacred temple, her heart pounding as the final echoes of the ancestors' voices faded into the night. She had passed every trial, proving her strength, wisdom, and compassion. Now the hidden kingdom stood before her, awaiting its rightful ruler. The old woman, no longer just a simple guardian but a high priestess of the land, stepped forward. In her hands was a golden crown, adorned with ancient symbols of power and destiny. "Nia, you are the daughter of kings, the blood of rulers flows within you," the priestess declared. "You have endured suffering, yet you remain pure of heart. Today we restore what was taken from you. Today you reclaim your birthright." The entire kingdom knelt before her, warriors, nobles, and elders alike. Nia's breath caught in her throat. Just days ago she had been a poor girl, mocked and rejected. Now she was about to be crowned a princess. She lowered herself onto the sacred throne, and the priestess placed the golden crown upon her head. A powerful surge of energy coursed through her veins, as if the spirits of past rulers had embraced her soul. The people erupted in cheers, chanting her name. "Princess Nia! Princess Nia!" For the first time in her life she felt truly seen, not for her poverty but for who she truly was. The gifts of a queen. With her new status came not just a crown but immense wealth and power. The royal treasuries were open to her, revealing gold, jewels, and resources beyond imagination. Silk garments were woven for her, and the finest warriors in the kingdom swore allegiance to her rule. She was no longer a girl who begged for kindness, she was now a leader, someone who had the power to change lives. But Nia knew that true power wasn't about riches or armies. It was about justice. She turned to the priestess, determination burning in her eyes. "I have one request," she said. "I must return to my village." The priestess nodded as if she had been waiting for these words. "Yes, child. The time has come. A journey back with power." The hidden kingdom had remained in secrecy for generations, concealed by ancient magic. But now it was time to reveal its strength. Nia stood at the head of a grand procession, warriors dressed in golden armor, banners of her newfound kingdom waving in the wind. Horses carried chests filled with gold and supplies, gifts meant not to flaunt, but to uplift those who had once shunned her. She was not returning as the girl they had rejected. She was returning as a force of destiny. As the grand gates of the hidden kingdom opened, the sun shone brightly upon her path. It was time to face the people who had once turned their backs on her. It was time for them to see what they had lost. The sun hung high in the sky, casting golden rays over the village as the drums of celebration echoed through the air. It was the day of Kofi's wedding, a grand event that had brought together the wealthiest families. The villagers bustled with excitement, eager to witness the union between Kofi and the daughter of a powerful chief. The bride's family had spared no expense. Silk banners adorned the trees and tables overflowed with food. Kofi, dressed in a lavish robe of deep blue and gold, stood proudly before the village, basking in admiration. But just as the wedding procession was about to begin, a commotion stirred at the edge of the village. The sound of hooves thundered against the earth, followed by the rhythmic beat of marching warriors. Heads turned. Gasps filled the air. A golden chariot, drawn by horses as white as pearls, rolled into the village. Atop it sat a figure draped in regal gold, her head held high, her presence commanding. It was Nia. The same Nia they had mocked. The same Nia they had cast aside. Only now she was unrecognizable, adorned in fine silks and dazzling jewels, a golden crown resting upon her head. Her once humble demeanor had been replaced by quiet authority. Behind her, warriors stood, their spears gleaming in the sunlight, their faces unreadable. The village fell into stunned silence. Kofi's eyes widened. His bride stiffened. His parents, who had once scoffed at the mere mention of Nia's name, now trembled in disbelief. She stepped down from the chariot with the grace of a queen. Every movement, every glance radiated power. She was no longer the girl they had rejected. She was royalty. The weight of regret. Kofi's father, who had once laughed at Nia's poverty, stepped forward, his voice shaking. "Princess Nia?" he stammered. Nia's lips curved into a small, knowing smile. "So now I am worthy of a name?" The villagers shifted uncomfortably. Whispers spread like wildfire. The poor girl they had dismissed had returned, not as a beggar but as someone they now had to respect. Kofi swallowed hard, shame coloring his face. He had thought Nia was gone forever, buried under the weight of his rejection. But now, standing before her, he realized what he had lost. He stepped toward her, his voice barely above a whisper. "Nia." She raised a hand, silencing him instantly. "There is nothing you can say that will change the past," she said calmly, yet her words carried the weight of thunder. The crowd held its breath. She turned to Kofi's bride, a woman who had been chosen for her wealth, not her heart. "I wish you happiness," Nia said, her tone sincere but distant. "For love without respect is nothing but an illusion." The bride glanced at Kofi, doubt flickering in her eyes. Was this the man she wanted to marry? A man who had thrown away someone so precious for the sake of status? The village kneels. The elders, recognizing Nia's presence as more than just a spectacle, fell to their knees. "This is a blessing from the ancestors," one elder whispered. One by one the villagers followed suit. Those who had once ridiculed her now bowed before her. The woman they had dismissed had risen above them all. Nia closed her eyes for a moment, feeling the weight of the moment. She could have sought revenge. She could have humiliated Kofi as he had humiliated her. But she had returned not as a bitter soul seeking vengeance, but as a queen who had found something far greater: herself. As the village bowed before her, she realized that true power wasn't in gold or wealth. It was in knowing your worth. And Nia had never been richer. The air was thick with silence, a stark contrast to the festive cheers that had filled the village just moments before. Every eye was fixed on Nia, the girl they had once cast aside, now a woman of unimaginable power. Kofi, still frozen in disbelief, felt his heartbeat hammer in his chest. His mind swirled with memories, of Nia's laughter, of the quiet moments they had shared beneath the village's ancient baobab tree, of the way she had once looked at him with love and trust. Now she looked at him with something else entirely: regality, strength, and worst of all, indifference. The plea for redemption. Kofi's breath hitched as he stepped forward, his voice trembling. "Nia, please," he said, desperation creeping into his tone. I made a mistake." The villagers murmured amongst themselves. Some nodded in agreement. Others watched in silence, their faces unreadable. Kofi's father, who had once laughed at the idea of his son marrying a poor girl, now stood with his head bowed, knowing that he had played a part in pushing his son toward ruin. "I was blind," Kofi continued, his eyes pleading. "I let pride and foolishness dictate my heart. But I swear to you, Nia, my love for you was always real." Nia tilted her head, observing him carefully. Once she might have melted at his words. Once she might have dreamed of this moment, Kofi on his knees begging her to take him back. But she had grown beyond that. The power shift. She stepped forward, her golden robes shimmering in the sunlight. The village watched in awe as she moved with the grace of a queen. "Love?" she repeated, her voice smooth but sharp as a blade. "You call it love?" Kofi flinched. "Was it love when you turned away from me to please your family?" she asked. "Was it love when you humiliated me in front of the entire village?" Kofi's lips parted, but no words came. "Love is not something you discard when it becomes inconvenient," Nia continued. "You did not love me. You loved the idea of me so long as I fit within the boundaries of your world." The villagers listened in stunned silence. Many had once laughed at Nia, called her names, whispered behind her back. Now those same people felt the weight of their mistakes pressing upon them. One by one heads lowered in shame. And then it happened. The village kneels. It started with an elder, the oldest woman in the village, her back curved with age, her eyes filled with wisdom and regret. She dropped to her knees. Then another elder followed. And another. Within moments the entire village, young and old, had fallen to their knees before Nia. "We were wrong," one villager whispered. "We did not see your worth," another admitted. Tears welled in some eyes. The weight of their actions had finally caught up with them. They had spent years belittling her, dismissing her, seeing her as nothing more than a poor girl unworthy of respect. But now they saw the truth. She had never been beneath them. They had been beneath her. A choice to make. Nia looked over the sea of bowed heads. She could demand anything now. Revenge. Wealth. Power. Kofi, still on his knees, dared to look up. What will you do?" he asked. For a long moment, Nia was silent. Then she exhaled softly. "The true test of power is not in revenge," she said, her voice carrying across the village. "It is in how you choose to wield it." She had returned not to destroy, but to show them the depth of their mistakes. And she had succeeded. With that, she turned away, stepping back toward her golden chariot. Kofi and the villagers watched, knowing they had lost something they could never reclaim. And as the wheels of her chariot turned, kicking up dust, one truth became clear. Nia had not just won their respect. She had transcended them all. The weight of power rested in Nia's hands. The entire village knelt before her, waiting for her judgment. She could demand anything. She could strip Kofi's family of their wealth, cast out those who had mocked her, and make them feel the humiliation she once endured. But as she stood there, golden robes flowing in the wind, she realized something. True power wasn't about vengeance. It was about wisdom. A lesson in humility. Nia turned to the village elders. "I was once nothing in your eyes," she said, her voice calm but firm. You mocked me, rejected me, and believed that wealth determined worth. The elders lowered their heads in shame. Yet here I stand, not because of riches, but because of my heart, my resilience, and my strength, she continued. She gestured toward the villagers. I will not rule through fear. But I will not forget either. The crowd held their breath, waiting for her next words. Then she did something no one expected. She walked up to an old woman in the crowd, one of the few who had been kind to her in her darkest days. You, Nia said, taking the woman's frail hands. You never turned your back on me even when others did. Tears filled the woman's eyes as Nia placed a pouch of gold in her hands. This is my first gift, Nia said. A reward for kindness. The villagers gasped. Then she turned to a young boy, one who had once thrown mud at her in the streets. She knelt before him. Do you understand now? She asked gently. The boy hesitated, then nodded. I was wrong, he whispered. I see now that I judged you unfairly. Nia smiled, placing a small golden ring in his palm. Remember this lesson. The worth of a person is not measured by their wealth. The fate of Kofi. Kofi still knelt before her, his face full of regret. Nia, he began, voice hoarse. I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but... Nia raised a hand, silencing him. I will not marry you, Kofi, she said firmly. Not because you are not worthy, but because you never truly saw me when I needed you most. Kofi swallowed hard, nodding. He knew she was right. Then she turned to his parents, the ones who had once sneered at her and cast her aside. You taught your son to value gold over love, she said. And now you must live with the consequences. She did not take their wealth. She did not banish them. Instead, she gave them a simple punishment, one that would linger longer than any exile. She let them live with the knowledge that they had once rejected the very woman who had become their ruler. That was justice enough. Kingdom reborn. Under Nia's guidance, the village flourished. She ensured that no one was ever judged for their status again. She built schools, created opportunities for the poor, and made sure no girl would ever face the shame she once endured. She proved, not through vengeance but through wisdom, that true strength comes from within. And as she walked through the village she once called home, she knew her story would be told for generations. Not as a tale of revenge, but as a legend of justice and mercy. The years passed, but Nia's name never faded. Her rise from a scorned village girl to a powerful ruler became the most told story in the land. People traveled from distant villages to see the queen who had once been rejected for being poor. They came not just for her riches but for her wisdom, the kind of wisdom that could not be bought with gold. A new era of fairness. Under Nia's rule, the village and the surrounding lands transformed. Gone were the days when wealth determined a person's worth. She declared that all children, no matter their status, would be educated. She ensured that the hungry were fed, the sick were treated, and the hardworking were rewarded, not by bloodline but by merit. Those who once judged her now praised her. They built statues in her honor. They sang songs of her journey, from the girl who was cast aside to the queen who changed the fate of an entire land. The symbol of the pure-hearted. One day a traveler arrived in the kingdom, a young girl with torn clothes and weary eyes. She had heard of Nia's story and had come seeking help. The guards hesitated, but Nia herself stepped forward. She took the girl's hands and smiled. I was once like you, she said. And with that, she took the girl in, proving once more that true greatness was not about gold or power. It was about lifting others the way no one had once lifted her. The final lesson. Kofi, now older and wiser, still lived in the village. He had married another, but his heart had never truly found peace. One evening he watched as Nia rode through the village, children running beside her, laughter filling the air. He sighed, knowing he had lost something more precious than wealth. A chance to love a queen, not because of her crown but because of her heart. But Nia had moved on. She had no bitterness, no regrets. She had built something greater than revenge. She had built a legacy. A legend that lives forever. When Nia's time on earth came to an end, the people wept. Not because they had lost a queen, but because they had lost a guiding light. Yet her story remained. Mothers told their daughters of her strength. Fathers reminded their sons that true worth was measured by character, not gold. And as the stars shone above the kingdom she built, one thing was certain. Nia would never be forgotten. For she was not just a queen. She was a legend.